The silence in the grand hall of the palace was so heavy it seemed to absorb the very air, constraining it within the lungs of everyone present. It was a silence laden with anticipation, incontestable authority, and for Amira, a chilling dread that seeped into her bones. She, a young woman whose spirit was as free as the wind sweeping over the dunes and whose heart nurtured the purity of rare oasis flowers, watched her life, her dreams, and every fragment of her identity crumble in a single, abrupt, undeniable instant. There was no prior whisper, no gentle warning, not even the slightest indication that her fate was about to be rewritten. Only Sheikh Yusef's deep, resonant voice, a melody of authority echoing millennia of tradition and control, delivering the words that would seal her future. He claimed her. To her, the sound was not a declaration, but a dry thunderclap striking her outright, ripping her from her very existence, from everything she knew, from every small joy she had ever built. Her eyes, once accustomed to the vast blue sky and the promise of peaceful mornings, now found themselves fixed on the imposing figure of the Sheikh. He was the embodiment of the untamed desert, beautiful in his magnitude, yes, but also relentless, mysterious, and full of inscrutable secrets that no one dared to question. Every gesture he made, every calculated movement, every piercing glance carried the weight of ancestral power she, a mere mortal, could never even dream of challenging. And there, right before her eyes, brimming with silent terror, was Tariq. The sparkle of jewelry and the whisper of silk fabric seemed to mock her pain. Tariq, her guardian, her confidant, the man who had always shielded her with a silent devotion that transcended the loyalty of a mere bodyguard. The love he bore for her was a secret, shared only through their gazes, a feeling so pure and profound that it never required words to be understood. But at that moment his eyes were a twisted mirror of his own anguish, a silent torment she could feel in every fiber of her being. He was there, still, a caged lion, his muscles tense beneath his garments, his jaw clenched, forced to witness the sealing of a promise he could never make, a cruel vow that she silently stole away the woman he loved, right before his eyes, without him being able to lift a single finger to prevent it. The sensation was akin to drifting in a turbulent sea, without a compass or any hope of reaching solid ground. Amira was no longer the young girl who cultivated rare flowers in the palace's secret garden, or lost herself in reading ancient poems under the silvery moonlight, dreaming of a future filled with choices and freedom. She had suddenly become a mere pawn in a game of power and passion she neither understood nor had chosen. A profound and overwhelming loss of control immersed her, a silent despair threatening to crush her soul. Her future, once an open horizon of infinite possibilities, had now become a dense, impenetrable fog, a path dictated by Ruki, a life that no longer belonged to her. The latent fear intertwined with the bitterest frustration, the silent rage of having her life decided for her, her body and soul promised away, without so much as a whisper of consent, without her voice carrying any weight. Sheikh Yusef's claim was more than just a trigger. It was an earthquake, the catastrophic event that tore her from her existence and mercilessly cast her into the heart of an unavoidable conflict. She found herself imprisoned, not by visible chains that could be broken, but by invisible threads of duty, family honor, and a complex web of social and political expectations. On one side, the formidable Sheikh Yusef, with his unquestionable authority, mysterious motives, and a commanding presence that overshadowed any environment. He was a force of nature, a man who did not ask but took, perceiving her not as a woman with aspirations, but as an element to strengthen his empire. On the other side, Tariq, with his restrained passion, his protective instinct, and a gaze that screamed what his lips could not utter, a love that was both a blessing and a curse in its silence. Two men, as contrasting as the vast, silent desert and the overwhelming, unpredictable storm, each representing a destiny, each exerting a different attraction and repulsion. The central conflict began to simmer, not only around her but above all within her. The excruciating tension between family honor, the duty imposed by tradition, and her unrestrained longing for freedom and self-determination. And amidst this painful crossroads, the imminent discovery of a forbidden love, one that would challenge all conventions, all rules, and could cost her everything, including her very life. The court watched. Murmurs spread like sand in the wind, each gaze a judgment, each whisper a pressure. The political maneuvers of the most powerful clans intertwined within this new reality, transforming her into a pivotal piece on a chessboard of ambitions and alliances. The suffocating closeness of both men, each with their own intensity, each representing an irreversible path, intensified the pressure on her already fragile soul, threatening to force her into an impossible choice. Could Amira, a woman whose destiny seemed sealed by an overwhelming claim and the weight of a silent, forbidden love, find the voice to carve her own path? Would she manage to reclaim the freedom of her heart in a world that demanded only obedience, where female will was but a mere echo of male authority? Stay until the end to discover how she transformed from a pawn into a hero, challenging the chains of tradition in search of her true essence and a destiny that was, at last, her own. Amira, however, was no longer the same. Sheikh Yusef's demand had shattered the mirror of her soul, and the reflected image now was that of a woman in captivity, even if the walls surrounding her were adorned with gold and gemstones. The days dragged on beneath a veil of hollow opulence, each dawn bringing with it the piercing reminder of her lost freedom. The vast chambers of the palace, once settings for dreams and quiet reading, had been transformed into gilded prisons, where silence was broken only by the murmur of fountains or the rustling of silk from her handmaidens, who watched her with a mixture of reverence and pity. She sought refuge in small things such as tending to rare flowers in an inner garden, a remnant of her simpler days. Yet even the fragrance of the petals seemed suffocated by the heavy atmosphere that hung over the palace. Her heart, once so open and vibrant, now closed into silent pain, a mourning for the life stolen from her. Frustration simmered beneath her composure, an anger that could not be voiced, a muffled scream choked by convenience and fear of repercussions. How could she, a woman, challenge the will of a sheikh, an enduring tradition, a destiny seemingly inscribed in the stars before her birth? Sheikh Yusef was an omnipresent presence, a scorching sun dominating her horizon. His eyes, which seemed capable of seeing through any disguise, watched her from afar and up close, not with the tenderness of a suitor, but with the cold analysis of someone evaluating a priceless possession. He did not court her with sweet words or romantic gestures. His claim was a fait accompli, an unquestionable decree. There was in him an aura of mystery, a silent power manifesting in every calculated movement, each decision spoken with unwavering conviction. Amira felt like a chess piece on a complex board, driven by greater forces whose rules she scarcely understood. His proximity was suffocating, not physically, but in the way his presence diminished the space for her own existence, her thoughts. And then there was Tariq, her silent shadow, her loyal guardian. He was always there, a steady rock amid the storm, his dark eyes sweeping the surroundings with relentless vigilance. Amira knew he watched her, not with the same coldness as Sheikh, but with a subtle intensity, an underlying concern he struggled to conceal. The forbidden love he harbored for her, a love never voiced aloud but palpable in every furtive glance, in every protective gesture, rendered her situation all the more excruciating. Tariq's presence served as a constant reminder of what she was losing, what might have been, and what could never be permitted. To her, he was an oasis in her personal desert, yet an oasis she was forbidden to approach. The tension between duty and desire became a battleground within her own mind. Her family's honor was at stake. The stability of her clan depended on her silent acquiescence, but her heart yearned for freedom, for a choice, for a love unforced. The idea of belonging to Sheikh, of being just another in his harem, of having her life dictated by a man who saw her as a symbol of power, was an unbearable pill to swallow. And each time her eyes met Tariq's, even if only for a brief moment, a forbidden spark of hope ignited, swiftly snuffed out by the relentless reality of her situation. The court, with its curious eyes and sharp tongues, was yet another heavy burden. The palace ladies, with their false smiles and envious gazes, whispered about Amira's fate, about the luck or curse of being chosen by the mighty Sheikh. Every whisper was a poisoned arrow, reinforcing the notion that she was an object, a trophy, and not a human being with feelings. The political maneuvers of the clans, which once seemed distant and irrelevant, now encircled her, transforming her into a pawn in a game of alliances and power. Her union with Sheikh Yusef was not merely a marriage, it was a pact, a consolidation of forces, with her as the seal, the guarantor. The pressure mounted daily. Sheikh Youssef, in his silent majesty, began including her in significant events, formal dinners where she was to sit beside him, a beautiful yet silent ornament. In these moments, the closeness was unbearable. Her fingers brushed against his as she took a glass. Their gazes intersected when he issued commands. And always, on the periphery of her vision, was Tariq, in her position a statue of restrained loyalty and sorrow. It was as if she were trapped within a triangle of emotions: the imposing authority of the Sheikh, Tariq's silent passion, and her own heart torn between duty and desire. One night, during an opulent feast, as laughter and music filled the hall, Amira felt the weight of everything crashing down upon her. The exotic dishes, graceful dancers, hollow compliments. Nothing could mask the sensation of entrapment. Her eyes wandered the crowd, desperate for an escape point, and she found Tariq's gaze. For a fraction of a second, his mask faltered. There was such profound pain in his eyes, such overwhelming helplessness, that Amira shivered. At that moment, the barrier between them seemed to dissolve. They were no longer bodyguards and protected, but two human beings connected by forbidden love and shared tragedy. The mutual recognition of that pain was a bond stronger than any chain. She knew she couldn't run away, couldn't openly defy the Sheikh, but that look from Tariq ignited a new flame within her, a spark of rebellion. If she couldn't change her external fate, perhaps she could in some way preserve the freedom of her spirit, the purity of her heart. The question was no longer whether she would find her voice, but how she would find it. How could a woman forge her own path when all routes had been traced by others? The answer, she realized, was not in escape, but in silent resistance, in the quest for an inner strength that would allow her to survive and perhaps even flourish beneath the weight of an imposed destiny. Amira recognized that her struggle would not be fought with blades or overt challenging words, but with the steadfast serenity of her soul. She began to observe Sheikh Youssef through a new lens, not merely with fear, but with a cold curiosity, attempting to decipher the riddles behind his imposing facade. He was a man of few words but commanding presence, each of his gaze seeming to carry the weight of a ton. Amira noticed his unquestionable authority in matters of state, sensing in every action the influence of the destiny that connected her to him. She was the piece he had chosen for his board, and this realization burdened her heavily. The proximity of Sheikh Youssef, once merely suffocating, now became a daily trial of her renewed resolve. He invited her for strolls through the palace gardens, or to observe the stars from the terrace. Amira responded with proper deference, yet her eyes held a glimmer that he perhaps did not notice, a spark of resistance, of a mind refusing to be subdued. She spoke of flowers, of the desert's beauty, always seeking neutral ground, keeping her heart locked away. But in Tariq's presence, this silent resistance found its most potent expression. Where Youssef embodied the desert, Tariq was the tempest that brought life. Their glances, once only mutual acknowledgement of pain, began to carry a new layer of communication, a secret language only they understood, a subtle nod, an almost imperceptible wink, a brief, accidental touch of hands that gooseflesh along the skin and made Amira's heart race. Small gestures, invisible to others but enormous in their significance to both. The forbidden love Tariq harbored for her, once a silent torment, now appeared to flourish amid adversity. Amira felt drawn to him with an intensity that terrified and seduced her. With each passing day, each fleeting glance they shared, each discreet move he made to protect her, the certainty that he loved her grew stronger, and with it, the awareness that this love was an abyss upon which they danced. Meanwhile, the court did not rest. Whisperings intensified, eyes sharpened. The ladies, with calculated smiles, watched Amira like hawks, perceiving her as a threat or a trophy. The political maneuvers, once distant, they surrounded her, transforming her into a pivotal piece in a game of alliances. The union with Sheikh Youssef was a political marriage, and each day, the pressure for her to fulfill her role intensified. There were meetings with counselors, ceremonies presenting her to other clan leaders, where Amira was showcased as the future queen, the symbol of the new alliance. She had to smile, nod, maintain her composure, while inside her soul was screaming. With every compliment on her beauty, with every toast to their union, she felt a part of herself wither away. Yet the spark of resistance ignited in her heart prevented her from breaking. She recalled her grandmother's words, "The palm tree bends to the wind, but does not break." And Amira was determined to be like the palm tree. One afternoon, as she wandered through the inner gardens accompanied by her maids and, at a respectful distance, Tariq, she spotted an ancient scroll forgotten on a stone bench. It was a poem about forbidden love, about choosing between duty and the heart. Her fingers brushed the faded letters and a deep emotion swept over her. At that moment, Tariq approached, feigning to adjust a loose vine. Their eyes met, and without a word, he understood her melancholy. He took the scroll and with a swift movement concealed it in his garments before the maids could notice. It was a small act but charged with meaning, a silent confirmation that he saw her, understood her, and was there for her. This exchange of glances, this act of camaraderie, marked a turning point. From that moment, the discovery of forbidden love ceased to be merely a possibility and became a tangible reality, a shared secret that united and separated them from the rest of the world. Amira felt the weight of family honor and the duty imposed by tradition as never before. But now, there was something more, a secret counterbalance, a longing for freedom that had a name: Tariq. The tension between the two men became almost unbearable for Amira. Sheikh Youssef, in his majestic composure, seemed to demand her complete submission, her body and soul. He gifted her rare jewels, but never the freedom of choice. His presence was a golden cage, and Amira felt increasingly suffocated. She knew he awaited from her an heiress, the continuation of his lineage, and that expectation hovered over her like a dark cloud. On the other hand, Tariq, with his protective presence and silent love, represented the promise of a world where she could be herself, where her heart would not be confined. Every time he was near, Amira felt a flicker of hope, but also an overwhelming fear. What would happen if the Sheikh found out? The punishment would be ruthless, not just for them, but perhaps for their families as well. Their love was a flickering flame in the midst of a storm, threatening to consume everything in its path. Amira began to question herself. Could she truly spend the rest of her life as a mere ornament, a political tool, a mother of heirs, never having known true love or genuine freedom? The image of Tariq, his silent strength, his devoted gaze, haunted her thoughts. She found herself on the edge of an abyss where duty dictated one path and her heart begged for another. The pressure from the court, the expectations, the political machinations, all seemed to push her in one direction, while an unseen force pulled her in another. She knew she needed to find her voice, not to shout or openly defy, but to shape her destiny in a way no one anticipated. Self-discovery was no longer a luxury but a necessity for survival. She had to understand who Amira truly was, beyond the Sheikh's bride, beyond Tariq's protege. She was more than a pawn. She was a woman with a vibrant heart, capable of loving and fighting for what she believed in, even if it meant challenging an empire. Amira knew that her strength did not reside in screams or open revolutions, but in the quietude of her mind and the resilience of her spirit. She began to see the palace not as her prison, but as a battlefield where weapons were glances, whispers, and the force of will. Each day was a lesson in survival, a test of her resolve not to break. She observed Sheikh Youssef with renewed intensity, seeking to understand not just his actions, but the motives behind them. He was an enigma, a natural leader who governed with an authority that seemed carved into the very stone of the desert. His presence radiated power, but also a loneliness that Amira, in her most introspective moments, could almost feel. He included her in more official functions, seating her beside him in councils and receptions, as a symbol of their impending union. In these occasions, the air between them was charged with an almost tangible tension. He spoke of his plans for the kingdom, of his conquests, of his legacy. Amira listened, nodded, offered thoughtful responses when necessary, but her heart remained an impenetrable fortress. She had learned to separate her public persona from her inner self, to wear a mask of deference and submission that concealed the flame of her silent rebellion. Yet, it was during clandestine encounters, in stolen glances with Tariq, that this flame was fed. The scroll with the forbidden poem had been only the beginning. They developed a secret language, a ballet of subtle gestures and glances laden with meaning. A slight tilt of Tariq's head could mean a warning, an almost imperceptible smile from Amira, understanding. They communicated through the vastness of a crowded hall, amidst the noise of a marketplace, or under the starry canopy of the courtyard, with the same clarity as whispered words in the ear. The love blossoming between them was an act of defiance in itself, a secret garden cultivated amid the shifting sands of an imposed destiny. With each exchange, each time Tariq's hand brushed hers as he passed an object, or he lingered a second longer in her gaze, Amira felt the promise of a different life, a life where freedom and passion were not enemies. This dangerous connection, however, made Sheikh Yusuf's presence even more suffocating. His expectations became more explicit. He bestowed upon her increasingly extravagant jewels, silk fabrics that seemed to cradle the body, and perfumes promising seduction. Each gift was a link in an invisible chain, a reaffirmation of his possession. He regarded her as an heiress, the merging of two powerful lineages, and that expectation hovered over Amira like a storm cloud, threatening to swallow her individuality. His conversations, once distant and formal, began to hint at the intimacy he anticipated, the duties of a wife. Amira felt like a rare flower that would be plucked and placed in a gold vase, admired for its beauty, but deprived of its roots and the freedom to bloom in its own way. The court, in turn, became an even more venomous nest of intrigue. The palace ladies, once merely curious, now openly envied or malicious. Rumors about Amira's fortune turned into speculation about her suitability, the strength of her lineage, and the possibility of an heir. Every step she took was scrutinized, every expression analyzed. Amira learned to walk with impeccable posture, to smile with her lips but not her eyes, to respond diplomatically, yet conceal her true self. She realized that to survive in that environment, she had to be as calculating as those around her, but with a different purpose: to protect her heart and soul. The political maneuvers of the clans intensified, and Amira perceived herself at the center of a complex web of alliances and rivalries. Her union with Sheikh Yusuf was not merely a marriage but a power treaty that would redefine the regional balance of forces. Clan elders gathered, debating dowries and lands, with her serving as currency, either as a guarantee of peace or a catalyst for war. The pressure for her to conform to her role was immense, coming from all sides, even from her own family, which saw the union as a means of social and political ascension. Yet amid all this pressure, Tariq's presence remained her only refuge, her sole hope that anything genuine could exist in her life. One night, during a nocturnal patrol through the palace corridors, Tariq found her alone on the terrace, gazing at the moon. The silence between them was different from the heavy silence. The court was silent. It was a stillness of understanding, of souls recognizing each other. "Are you well, my lady?" he asked, his voice a gentle murmur barely breaking the night's quietude. Amira turned, her eyes meeting his in the dimness. "I am as well as one can be when one is a bird in a gilded cage, Tariq." He took a step forward, closing the gap between them. Cages can be opened, even the gilded ones. Her heart raced. It was a bold declaration, almost an invitation. "And what does the bird outside hope for?" she whispered, testing the limits, feeling both danger and promise in his words. Tariq looked at her, and at that moment, the suppressed passion in his eyes was a fire Amira felt within her own soul. "Freedom, my lady, and perhaps a flight alongside another bird daring to dream." The air between them crackled with the intensity of emotion. In that moment, the promise of forbidden love ceased to be a distant hope and became an ardent, perilous reality. Amira knew Tariq's words were a high-stakes gamble, a risk that could cost them everything. Yet at the same time, they were the only truth her heart recognized amid a sea of lies and obligations. She was now teetering on a precipice, with the abyss of duty on one side and the ocean of forbidden freedom on the other. The choice, she realized, was not just between two men, but between two versions of herself, and the woman she was becoming could no longer ignore the call of her own heart. From that moment on, the air I drew into my lungs seemed thicker, laden with the weight of that revelation, and the silent promise ignited by Tariq's words. My heart, once a wounded bird confined in a cage, now beat with renewed vigor, yet also with icy fear. The freedom he offered was a flight into the abyss of the unknown, a chasm of consequences I dared barely to contemplate. But the alternative, the life of submission and duty that awaited me beside Sheikh Yusuf, felt more suffocating than ever. The proximity of the Sheikh became a daily torment. He intensified his courting, which to me was nothing but displays of possession. His gifts grew more lavish, his touches more frequent, though still respectful. Every jewel he offered, every silk fabric he chose for me, seemed to transform into a link in the invisible chain restraining me. He spoke of the future, of our union, of the lineage I was meant to bear, and each word hammered against the door of my soul. I felt his gaze upon me, heavy and demanding, as if trying to decipher the secrets I kept hidden. There was a determination in his eyes, a steadfast conviction that I belonged to him, a destiny he had mapped out that no one could alter. The court, in the meantime, was in turmoil. Preparations for the wedding began to take shape, and every detail vividly reminded me of my sentence. The palace maidens, once mere gossips, now split between flattery and overt envy. Their smiles were knives, their whispers, poison. I was the center of all attention, yet I felt more invisible than ever, a valuable piece in a public display. Political maneuvers grew more overt. In meetings with Sheikh's advisors, I was presented as the guarantee of new alliances, the bridge between powerful clans. My voice, if I dared to speak, would only be an echo of the expectations bearing down on me. But amidst this suffocating oppression, Tariq's presence was my anchor, my beacon in a storm. After that night on the terrace, our communication became bolder, more vital. Our eyes met more frequently, charged with a silent urgency. A blink, a subtle hand movement, a discreet adjustment. Your posture beside me. Everything became part of a secret code only we understood. He would hand me small notes, hidden in books or amidst the flowers I tended, with short messages that ignited my hope. Never give up. One read, "I'm here." Another assured. These small acts of rebellion were my oxygen. I felt Tariq's forbidden passion not only in his eyes but in his presence, in his determination to protect me, even from afar. He was the storm that promised to break the desert, the strength capable of tearing me from that gilded prison. I was irresistibly drawn to him, an attraction that defied logic, duty, and imminent danger. Every time he placed himself between me and an unwanted gaze or his hand brushed mine for a second, an electric current shot through my body, a reminder of what it was to feel alive, desired by someone who truly saw me. The internal tension became a constant battlefield. My family's honor, my clan's fate, the peace of a kingdom, all seemed to rest on my shoulders. How could I, a woman, defy centuries of tradition, break an agreement promising stability? But on the other hand, my heart yearned for freedom, for a love unbound by obligation, for a life where my choices mattered. The image of Tariq, his silent love, his courage to challenge the rules for me, was a persistent thorn in my soul. I found myself torn, caught between what was expected of me and what I secretly desired with all my might. Sheikh Youssef, in his majestic calm, began to pressure me in more personal ways. He spoke of building a new pavilion for us, of a journey we would take after the wedding, of how he expected me to adapt quickly to my new role. He was not cruel, but his resolve was unyielding. He believed he was offering me a future of safety and power, unaware that what I longed for most was something he could never give, the freedom to be myself. He saw me as a symbol, a decoration, a tool for his schemes, and this realization wounded me deeply. Amira, I thought, was not just a name but a soul, a spirit that refused to be broken. Self-discovery was no longer an optional path but the only means of survival. I needed to find the strength to forge my own destiny, even if it meant challenging the most powerful man in the kingdom, and risking everything for the forbidden love blooming in my heart. With each dawn, I felt time slipping away, the noose tightening. The choice was imminent, and I knew that whichever path I took, there would be no turning back. My life was about to change in a way no one could foresee, not even myself. The days that followed were a countdown to the end of my old life. Each dawn brought the sensation that the air was becoming thinner. The palace walls, once merely majestic, now closed in around me like a gilded coffin. The preparations for the wedding reached frenzied heights. Seamstresses came and went, bearing silks and embroideries that seemed to carry the weight of a fortune and millennia-old tradition. Jewelers displayed crowns and necklaces whose stones sparkled with the coldness of an unchangeable destiny. I was the focal point of it all, an adornment to be styled, a symbol to be showcased, and every forced smile I offered was a small death for my soul. Sheikh Youssef, in his silent anticipation, appeared more imposing than ever. His eyes tracked me with a possessiveness that was not love, but the certainty of a vested right. He treated me with formal deference, yet behind it, I sensed the iron fist that would shape my future. He spoke of heirs, alliances, the legacy I would carry, and each word hammered nails into the coffin of my freedom. I felt like a statue, perfect in its beauty but lifeless, voiceless, without choice. The pressure from the court was overwhelming. Ladies whispered, elders observed, each with their own intertwined political and social interests tangled in my fate. I was the central piece of a grand game, and daily, the stakes grew higher. Yet amidst this suffocation, Tariq was my breath. Our notes became more frequent, more desperate. Small scrolls hidden beneath a jasmine leaf in the garden, or discreetly passed during a water glass at a banquet. "Do not bow," one said. "Your strength lies in your heart," whispered another. In one of these notes, he asked me to meet him at the old palace observatory after nightfall, an hour before the final day of preparations. The risk was immense, the punishment unimaginable, but my hungry heart for hope could not refuse. That night, under a sky studded with stars that seemed silent witnesses to our forbidden love, I found him. The observatory, once a place of peace, now seemed the stage for an imminent drama. Tariq was there, his imposing figure framed by the silver light of the moon, his eyes more intense. Nothing like ever before. There were no saccharine words of love, only the urgency of two hearts teetering on the edge of the abyss. "Amira," he began, voice gravelly, "you can't do this. You can't surrender to a destiny that isn't yours." I stepped closer, feeling the warmth of his presence, the promise of a different life. "And what am I supposed to do, Tariq? Challenge a sheikh? Defy centuries of tradition? Condemn my family to ruin?" He held my hands, his fingers strong and unwavering. "You are not alone. I am with you. I have always been." That touch, that promise, was an electric shock coursing through my soul. It was the acknowledgement that despite everything, I was not alone in my struggle. "But what can we do?" I whispered, tears threatening to fall. He looked at me, resolve etched into every line of his face. "You must find your voice, my lady. Not to scream, but to declare your truth, to be who you truly are." In that moment, I understood. He wasn't asking me to run away with him, nor was he asking me to openly choose him. He was asking me to choose myself, to reclaim my identity, my essence, my right not to be possessive property. His love was not possessive but liberating. The return to my chambers was a blur. Tariq's words echoed in my mind, mingled with the weight of the sheikh's and the court's expectations. The wedding morning arrived like a hangman's noose. I was dressed in the most sumptuous gown I had ever seen, embroidered with gold threads and pearls, heavy and suffocating. My attendants perfumed me, adorning my hair with rare flowers. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger, a bride in a silk veil, yet with eyes reflecting an impending storm. The palace was ablaze with celebration. Musicians played festive melodies, dancers moved gracefully, the scent of incense and spices filled the air. But for me, it was the silence of sacrifice. The procession began. I walked through the grand hall, watched by hundreds of eyes. Every step was a test. Every smile I received, a dagger. I saw my father smiling proud and my mother tears in her eyes, tears of joy for the bright future awaiting me. And then, I saw him. Sheikh Youssef was at the altar, imposing in his ceremonial robes, his figure radiating power and authority. His gaze met mine and there was a hint of triumph in his eyes. He extended his hand to me, a gesture of possession, not an invitation. I felt the weight of each glance, the pressure of every expectation, the fate closing in around me. But then on the periphery of my vision, I saw Tariq. He was at his post, slightly apart, but his eyes were fixed upon me. And in those eyes, I saw strength, courage, and the quiet love that granted me permission to be myself. Just as my hand was about to touch the sheikh's, an unexpected force invaded me. It was the voice Tariq had encouraged me to find, the flame he had ignited. I withdrew my hand, not violently, but with a steady quietude that stunned everyone. A deathly silence fell over the hall, replacing the music and murmurs. Sheikh Youssef looked at me, surprised, his hand still extended in the air. "Amira," he said, his voice low but laden with danger, What does this mean? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my own words even before speaking them. It means, my Sheikh, that this union cannot happen. My voice, once a whisper within my own thoughts, now resonated with a clarity that surprised me. I cannot marry a man who sees me as a symbol, an acquisition. My heart does not belong to myself in this union, and I refuse to live a life where my soul is imprisoned. The shock in the room was palpable. The guests murmured, some horrified, others in awe. Sheikh Youssef's face clenched, surprise transforming into contained fury. That silence that took over the hall was more frightening than any furious scream. I could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes piercing my skin, each one a sharp blade of judgment. Sheikh Youssef, with his hand still extended in the air, looked like a marble statue, but his eyes were two glowing embers, promising a hell I had never imagined. The contained fury on his face was a volcano ready to erupt. I knew I had crossed a line no woman in my realm had ever dared to even glimpse. My voice, still slightly trembling but firm in its conviction, echoed through the heavy silence. I cannot, my Sheikh, I repeated, each word a step deeper into the abyss of the unknown. My soul refuses to be a possession. No one moved. The air was so thick it seemed suffocating. Then, a movement at the periphery of my vision. Tariq. He took a step forward, subtly, almost imperceptibly to most. But to me, it was like thunder. His eyes met mine, and in them there was no fury or despair but a quiet determination, an unshakable promise. He was there, ready for whatever came. It was the confirmation of what I already knew. My choice was not just mine, it was ours. Sheikh Youssef finally lowered his hand. The sound of his voice when he spoke was a dangerous whisper, but it echoed throughout the hall. You're challenging me, Amira. Before everyone, before Allah, I challenge the destiny imposed upon me, my Sheikh, I responded, feeling a strength I didn't know I possessed. I claim my right to love. The word love hung in the air like a spark in a powder keg. Murmurs began to escalate, transforming into a hum of scandal and outrage. I could see my father, with a pale face, and my mother, with her hand over her mouth, eyes filled with horror. They knew what my act meant. It meant disgrace, not only for me but for our entire lineage. Sheikh Youssef turned to Tariq, and the look he cast on my bodyguard was pure venom. And you, Tariq, is this the fruit of your loyalty? Conspiring with your Sheikh's bride? Tariq did not hesitate. He stepped forward, standing by my side, a human shield. My loyalty is to the truth, my Sheikh, and the truth is that Amira is not a possession to be claimed, but a woman with a free heart. The audacity of her words was shocking. A bodyguard, a servant, openly challenging Sheikh Youssef. Silence returned, even heavier than before. It was a direct challenge to the Sheikh's power and authority. I felt my own heart freeze with fear, but I did not regret it. I could not regret the truth. Sheikh Youssef took a deep breath, and for a moment I thought he would order Tariq's execution, or mine. But he was a man of calculations, a leader who thought about the consequences. A bloodbath on his wedding day would not be a display of strength but of loss of control. So be it, Amira, he said, his voice as cold as desert ice. Your heart does not belong to me, nor to this palace. Then let it be free, but not in my kingdom, nor under my protection. His eyes turned to the court, to the clan elders. This union is dissolved. Lady Amira will be stripped of her titles and exiled to the distant lands of her mother's tribe, where she can live her freedom away from everyone's eyes. And you, Tariq. He hesitated, and the air grew even more tense. Your loyalty has been tested and failed. You are no longer my bodyguard. You will be banished. Your paths shall no longer cross in my domain. The verdict was delivered, and although it wasn't death, it was a life of exile, of separation. Exile for me, banishment for Tariq, and the cruelest prohibition to never meet again. Sheikh Youssef, in his calculating wisdom, had given us freedom but taken away the chance to enjoy it together. He had renounced his possession, but not his power to divide us. It was a punishment heavier than any prison. The days that followed blurred into a tide of pain and hurried goodbyes. I was stripped of my bridal garments, my jewelry collected. The opulence of the palace became a cruel reminder of what I had lost and what I had gained. My parents, despite their sadness and shame, embraced me. And in my mother's eyes I glimpsed a flicker of pride, a silent understanding that I had chosen myself. We set out in separate caravans, I heading south, toward the arid lands of my maternal ancestry, and Tariq I knew toward some place beyond the borders of the realm, an exiled soul without a fixed destination. The distance between us became an abyss, yet the promise of freedom, even if solitary, burned brightly within me. Months passed and the desert became my new home. Far from the luxury of the palace and the intrigues of the court, I began to rediscover myself. My mother's lands were harsh, but the simplicity of life, the work with sheep, the weaving of fabrics, the tending of medicinal herbs, all of it gave me purpose. I was Amira, the woman who cultivated flowers and had defied a sheikh. But now I was also Amira, the woman learning to survive in the desert, finding strength in sandstorms and solace in the vast starry sky. My transformation was not instant but gradual, like a mountain eroded by the wind. The silent pain of parting from Tariq was an open wound, yet the forbidden passion that had united us became a spark of hope in my heart. I knew he was out there somewhere, and that someday our paths might cross again. That belief was my sustenance, my guide. I fulfilled the long-standing dream of living a life of choices. Even if those choices had led me into exile, I found a new purpose, helping the women of my new tribe by teaching them to read and write, sharing the knowledge I had gained in the palace, and learning from them the wisdom of the desert. My life in the desert was not easy, but it was mine. Each sunrise painted the vast expanse with colors I never knew existed, and every sunset brought a peace I had never experienced within the walls of the palace. The women of the tribe, with their stories of resilience and ancestral knowledge, welcomed me as one of their own. I learned to read the dunes as if reading a book, to extract sustenance from the driest land, and to find beauty in simplicity. The pain of separation from Tariq never fully dissipated. It was a scar on my soul, a constant reminder of what we had lost, but it was also proof of what we had dared to feel, of the truth we had fought to defend. I became a storyteller, not only of the legends of my new tribe, but of my own journey, of the woman I was and the woman I had become. In every tale I spoke of the courage to choose oneself, to challenge imposed norms, to seek the freedom of the heart. The children listened to me with wide eyes, and the elder women nodded in understanding of the depth of my words. One day, while gazing at the horizon, a solitary silhouette appeared in the distance, a rider traversing the sands. My heart leapt, foolish and immediate hope. But as the figure drew closer, I realized it was not Tariq, just a merchant, yet another anonymous face amidst the vastness of the desert. The disappointment stung like a needle, but soon it transformed into a new awareness. I understood that the freedom I sought was not in reuniting with Tariq or in any external event. It was within me, in my ability to keep going, to dream, to love, regardless of circumstances. That moment was a new beginning, a chance that taught me to let go of expectations and embrace the present. I found my voice not to shout my love for Tariq to the world, but to whisper the truth of my existence to myself. I had challenged the Sheikh and the imposed destiny, not for a fairy tale ending, but to forge a path where my soul could breathe. Tariq, I knew, was doing the same, honoring his own journey to freedom, wherever he was. He had given up everything for me, and his courage, like mine, would lead him to a destiny shaped by his own hands. After all, life doesn't always give us what we want, but it gives us what we need to grow. And sometimes what seems like a colossal mistake in the moment, an act that defies everything, is simply destiny opening a different door, one that leads to the true essence of who we are. It is in the desert of uncertainty that we find the oases of our own strength. If you've ever faced an error that turned into a triumph, share your story in the comments. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any more stories of transformation and courage.